for example, Glock 17, as you can see, flips up quite a bit. Switch over to muzzle brake because now no more flip. So hello gamers and welcome back to another video. Now barrel attachments are one of the most important attachments on your gun and can have massive effects. In fact, they're probably the second most important attachment other than probably ammo types, because these things have massive effects on recoil, rate of fire, ranges, and stuff like that an underbarrel cannot have. So these are very important. Also, if you guys want to see the best underbarrel or grip attachments, let's go for 1,000 likes on this video and I'll make that video. But yeah, subscribe if you're new and please smash like because I want to make a grip video as well. Let's just jump right into it. So first off, you have barrel attachments, and these are going to be long and short barrel, and I'll go over what they do overall. The general idea is that they increase your penetration, your ranges, and your velocity, and their downside are that you can't run, a more recoil-based attachment. Some of them will reduce your max range, but increase your min range, which is usually kind of helpful, but sometimes it's not that good, and of course, they will give you worse handling. These attachments are some of the best in the game, but go to advanced stats and see what you like. If it's decreasing range too much for you, then I don't recommend you have these attachments on, or if you want a suppressor or a compensator or something else, then don't use these. And of course, there are no objectively best times to run a long barrel because some people are going to like them more than others. But then we have the short barrel attachment, and this one is definitely case to case as well. But usually what it does is it decreases your range a little bit, your velocity, and your pen a little bit, but will give you better handling. Most importantly, on most of your guns other than sniper rifles, so assault rifles, carbines, those kind of guns will have this effect, is it will actually increase your headshot multiplier. Now this is pretty good. If you want to have a better headshot multi and the possibility to two-hit kill a head on some guns that otherwise would not be able to, this is pretty good. And also you got to keep in mind that this does not reduce damage overall, so you're going to be doing more damage headshot, long range, and close range regardless of your ranges, which is pretty good. So if you hit a lot of headshots and you want better handling, you don't really care about your recoil, the short carbine barrel attachments like that, those are going to be pretty good. It also does change your sound effect a little bit, and overall I would give it a solid recommend some of the time, but I don't really use this one too much. I will use long barrel quite a bit, but yeah, the carbine barrel has its use and it's definitely one of the best barrel attachments in the entire game. But now let's get into the muzzle attachment, and I'll talk about the flash hider really quickly. This does slightly reduce your recoil by 5%, and it will hide your muzzle flash, which is kind of cool but not really that helpful. I don't really recommend this unless you don't have anything else for recoil, but then you get 20 kills and get compensator, because compensator is probably the best barrel attachment in the game overall. There are some guns that it's not quite as good on, but most guns, at least for automatics, this is going to be the best, because basically what it does is it gives you better horizontal recoil by 40%. That's camera recoil, but yeah, every gun has camera recoil, so it doesn't really matter. Basically, you're gonna have significantly better accuracy when it comes to your horizontal recoil. So your gun doesn't go as much side to side when shooting, which as you can see makes your guns a lot more accurate. This will actually increase your vertical recoil by a tiny bit, but it's really not that noticeable except on a few guns, and especially semi-auto guns. The compensator is not really that good on semi-autos because the guns that are semi-automatic usually go up and down more than they go side to side. So this is definitely an automatic one, but when it's on autos, it is amazing on basically every freaking automatic gun in the entire game. This is going to be your go-to along with the T-brake, and I'll talk about what the T-brake does in a little bit, but yeah, if you're going to be using any barrel attachment, if I had to pick one for you to use at all times, it would probably be the compensator because it's that good. Sure, the T-brake is a little bit overall better, technically speaking, but it's really no contest. The compensator is going to be more effective. But then we have the muzzle brake. Now, the muzzle brake got a pretty substantial bump, and yeah, it's a lot better, but compensator is still just more useful because the muzzle brake does something that isn't as helpful, even if it has no downside to being used now. Basically, all it does is it reduces your vertical recoil by 35%, which is awesome. And as you can see, your gun doesn't go up as much. However, it doesn't improve your horizontal, so that basically means your gun will be going more side to side. So as you can see, it's more of like a line instead of just up and down. So I like the grouping of the compensator a lot better along with most players. But if your gun has only vertical kick, or if it's semi-auto, because yes, of course, this is going to be the best semi-auto barrel attachment in the game overall, there's kind of a reason to use X-ring on some guns, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. And you're probably like, okay, it's the opposite of the compensator. So the compensator is less horizontal, more vertical, so the muzzle brake is going to be less vertical, more horizontal, right? But actually, that's not the case anymore. It used to be the case because, yeah, it makes complete sense. It makes the muzzle gases go out from a different part of the gun, or a different side, I guess, so it's going to make the recoil in that direction more and in the other direction less. Well, that used to be the case, but for some reason, they decided, muzzle brake is not quite as good, so they gave it a buff. It now reduces recoil by more, and it doesn't really have a negative effect on recoil at all, so it's basically a direct upgrade to your gun. So technically, it's a better attachment than compensator, but of course, compensator has the more meaningful upside. So muzzle brake is really, actually really good, but compensator just does the thing that's kind of better. So overall, these are both some of the best barrel attachments in the game. I'm definitely going to say compensator is better, but of course they're for different types of recoil, so you can't really compare them. But yeah, compensator has more guns that it's just kind of better to use it on. But if you don't like vertical climb as much, muzzle brake will be good, but you won't have as good like overall grouping kind of, you know. I just got even more ammo, so I can just keep going, but I won't do that because I've talked about the muzzle brake enough. F5. Now next up we have the T-brake, and if you know what this is, you're probably like, okay, this is the best overall barrel in the game, and yes, technically speaking it is. However, of course, compensator has more of a meaningful upside, even if it has a little bit of downside. But basically what the T-brake does is it reduces recoil by 10%. And yes, you heard me right, it's 10% overall. Vertical and horizontal are going to be reduced by this, so you're going to get an overall more accurate gun, about 10%, but it depends on the gun, you know, because not every gun has more camera recoil than other guns. Some guns have a lot of rotational recoil, and then this is still going to be pretty good, but not quite as good. This attachment is good if you have a gun with like overall recoil. Like compensator will have too much vertical recoil, and muzzle brake doesn't really have enough horizontal reduction, and then those guns are going to be great with this. There is an attachment later in this list that's going to be overall kind of nicer and does about the same thing, but in a different way, but I won't spoil what that is. And that one is more used in my loadouts, but I just prefer that one. Next up, we have the X-ring, and this basically reduces your rotational recoil, so specific guns are going to be good with it. And honestly, it's not that great on most automatic guns. It's okay on a few like HK416. It can get pretty accurate with a good setup with that, as you can see. However, the guns you should be using this the most on are 100% going to be pistols without stocks. Now, pistols have a lot of rotational recoil, and you can definitely see that in most pistols in this game. Even the XIX, it rotates up. As you can see, the barrel, it's going up. This is especially apparent on guns like the Glock 17, M9, 1911s, stuff like that. And if your gun has a lot of muzzle flip to it, use X-ring. It's going to be amazing, because that's basically just vertical rotational recoil. If you can lower that, your gun is going to flip up a lot less. The reason I say without stocks is because stocks on most pistols basically just change all your rotational to camera recoil. Like for example, Glock 17, as you can see, flips up quite a bit. Now, if I were to put a G stock on it, I would want to switch over to muzzle brake, because now no more flip. The Halbig device definitely exists. It's not good. It basically just makes your recoil go down instead of up. I guess I can show you what that looks like. Gun goes down. Not very good. And while the next game loads, I guess I'll talk about the loudener as well. This attachment basically gives your gun more bass and makes it louder, and it's kind of cool, but not that good. It does reduce recoil a little bit, kind of similar to a T-brake, but it actually reduces your velocity, but it does increase suppression, but not that good. Now, next up, we have the muzzle booster. The muzzle booster is a great attachment, but it's not quite as good as it used to be. Even though they buffed it a little bit, I don't feel like I'm seeing it as much in this game. The muzzle booster is only good on very low recoil guns, because basically what it gives you is 8% more RPM. So your gun fires 8% faster, which you can definitely tell in this gun because it gives it an extra 60 RPM, which is quite a bit, you know? That's as much as the HK416 instead of as much as the M16A3, but as you can see, lots more recoil. Is this attachment great? Not really, but it's pretty good. I do recommend it if you want more rate of fire, faster time to kill. You go from 0.15 to 0.14. Wow, massive difference. But muzzle booster can be kind of helpful if you have a gun with like no recoil. But now let's get on to some of my favorite attachments in the game now, which are the suppressor attachments. There's really only like 3 that I really want to talk about as being good. And the first one is the default suppressor, which is one of the most no downsides attachments in the game. It gives you a little bit better rotational recoil, so not a big deal. And its downside is actually just that it basically makes you walk slower while aiming down sights by like a tiny bit. You will not notice that at all. However, the upsides are of course a little bit better recoil, not a massive deal, probably like non-existent, but it gives you heavy suppression. People cannot see you on the radar unless you're super close, and they can't really hear you either because your gun is really quiet. And yeah, it's low kills as well. If you have like no kills on a gun, run a default suppressor. No other suppressor except the 2 that I get to. Yeah, it has downsides, and that's basically just that you can't really run a different attachment because compensator would be better, but it's basically just free suppression for low kills with essentially no downside. A 30 kill attachment, run it if you're low on kills. But then we have the ARS suppressor, and this is essentially a T-brake plus a suppressor put together. It has the same recoil benefits as a T-brake. Essentially, you get 10% better recoil, but it also has, you know, the benefit of being a suppressor. But it actually has a bit of a downside, which is that it actually reduces your damage ranges by a little bit. Your min damage range isn't going to be as good. And generally speaking, your min damage range isn't as important as your max damage range. It's not that big of a deal. It's probably like a 15% reduce in range, but keep in mind, it does not reduce damage or velocity of your gun, so it's not really as bad as you probably expect. I think the ARS suppressor is probably one of the top 5 barrels in the game, that being probably like compensator, muzzle brake, ARS ARS suppressor, T-brake, and then I don't even know, I guess a long barrel. Those are like the 4 discounting long and short barrels that everyone should be using on like every gun. There's pretty much no reason to use any of the other ones, but there is kind of, so that's why I'm mentioning those ones as well, because they're good in like certain cases. But yeah, the ARS suppressor is great. If you like the T-brake but also want suppression, this is great. I use it on a ton of guns now because you get accuracy and a really quiet gun. The range decrease is not that big of a deal. You're probably not going to notice it too much, and of course it doesn't reduce velocity, which is cool as well, and it also hides muzzle flash. All the other suppressors will reduce your recoil by a little bit, but they'll also reduce your range by more and not have as good of a recoil effect. ARS suppressor is by far the best one you should be using every single time. The other suppressors sound different and they might be cool to you, but they're not good. Also mentioned oil filter. This will reduce your RPM by 15%. So in this case, you lose about 108. It will lower your recoil significantly, but it will also lower your range significantly, both max and min damage range, your suppression by 80%, and your muzzle velocity. So the oil filter is not very good, but the muffler is actually pretty good. This will lower your RPM by 10%, which sounds pretty bad, and in a lot of cases, it's pretty bad. But if you don't like having as fast of an RPM gun, you could run this. The muffler is a pretty specialty attachment. It's pretty cool. It's definitely worth checking out if you want lower RPM and lower recoil, and it does only reduce your muzzle velocity by 10%, which isn't too bad, and it does not reduce range, so that's pretty cool. It will give you kind of an interesting sound. I think it sounds really good on a lot of guns, but the muzzle velocity loss makes it like pretty much unused for me. I just don't really like that too much. Muffler used to be by far the best suppressor in the game because it used to not reduce range or damage, which you guys didn't know, the suppressors used to be terrible and all of them used to reduce your damage and range. The ARS suppressor was actually probably the worst suppressor in the game by far, but they were all pretty bad. The muffler is pretty cool, but yeah, if you guys did enjoy, make sure to like and subscribe if you're new. 1,000 likes and I'll do the grip attachments. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Have a nice day.